It was meant to be a voyage into history, a dive to touch the remains of the world's most famous shipwreck. Instead, it became a mirror of that very tragedy. More than a century after the Titanic sank in 1912, another vessel met its end in the same cold depths of the North Atlantic. Only this time, the disaster was not caused by ice, arrogance, or a lack of lifeboats. It was caused by pressure, invisible, absolute, and merciless. In June 2023, 5 men entered a small carbon fiber cylinder called Titan, a submersible designed to reach the Titanic's resting place, nearly 3,800 meters below the surface. They believed they were safe. They believed they were making history. But in the silent world beneath the waves, belief is nothing against physics. They wanted to touch the Titanic. Instead, the ocean touched them back. From the very beginning, the parallels were haunting. The Titanic was the unsinkable ship, a symbol of human mastery over nature. The Titan was the revolutionary submersible, a symbol of innovation without limits. Both were built by men who believed they had outsmarted the sea. Both were wrong, and both carried people who trusted that belief. When the Polar Prince, a Canadian support vessel, released Titan into the waves that morning, the ocean looked calm, like a sheet of steel under a cold sky. There was nothing to suggest that anything would go wrong. No storm, no warning, just silence and depth. But beneath that calm surface lies a world that does not forgive mistakes. The deeper you go, the thinner the line becomes between science and hubris, between exploration and delusion. Every 10 meters adds one more atmosphere of pressure, 14.7 pounds per square inch. By the time Titan reached its goal depth, it faced pressures over 380 times greater than at sea level. That is the equivalent of having a fully loaded Boeing 747 thing on every square meter of its hull. The sea is not cruel, it is simply indifferent. It accepts what is built to survive and crushes what is not. Titan, like the Titanic before it, was never built for forgiveness. The story of Titan began not in a naval shipyard, but in a warehouse in Everett, Washington. Its creator, Stockton Rush, was not a traditional engineer of the deep. He was an aerospace dreamer, a man who wanted to bring private citizens to the ocean floor the way others were sending tourists into space. His company, Oceangate, was founded on the promise that the deep sea should be accessible, affordable, and thrilling. Rush believed the bureaucratic world of safety standards was holding back innovation. If you want to be safe, he once said, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. He wasn't joking. Instead of titanium or steel, the Titan's main pressure hull was made from carbon fiber, a lightweight material common in airplanes, bicycles, and race cars, but rarely used in deep-sea engineering. It was bonded to titanium end caps, forming a capsule large enough for 5 people to sit cross-legged, shoulder to shoulder, with no room to stand. The controls, a Bluetooth Logitech game controller. The lighting, basic, the toilet, a small black box behind a curtain. And the view, a single porthole, 56 centimeters wide, designed to face the Titanic herself. To Rush, simplicity was the point. The submersible was experimental, but that was part of the thrill. Certification, he said, was too slow, too expensive, and too conservative. OceanGate's website openly stated that Titan was not certified by any recognized safety agency. Passengers signed waivers acknowledging that they could die. Most never read beyond the first paragraph. For Rush, rules were for people without imagination. At some point, he said, you have to decide if you're an explorer or a tourist. His investors and clients were often both. The submersible cost $250,000 per seat, a price of admission to touch the untouchable, to see what few had seen. In total, only a handful of dives had been successfully made to the Titanic's wreck before 2023, most by government or scientific teams. OceanGate wanted to change that, to make the deep ocean an adventure destination. There were warning signs from the beginning. Former engineers at OceanGate raised concerns about the carbon fiber hull, saying that the material could develop invisible cracks over time under repeated pressure cycles. One employee, David Lockridge, was fired after he warned that Titan's viewport was not rated for the depths it aimed to reach. In 2018, a group of submersible experts from the Marine Technology Society sent Rush a formal letter urging him to undergo proper certification before continuing passenger dives. Rush ignored them all. He compared his critics to the doubters of the Wright brothers. "Do you think the first airplane was certified?" he said in an interview. He saw himself as a pioneer, but pioneers often die on the frontier. By 2023, Titan had already completed several test dives to the Titanic site. Each one pushed the limits a little further. The carbon fiber creaked and popped as pressure built around it, but the team called those noises normal. Rush even brought his teenage son on one dive. He seemed immune to fear, or perhaps blind to it. That June, Titan prepared for its next descent. A new group of passengers had arrived, wealthy, influential, and eager. Among them, Hamish Harding, British billionaire and aviator, holder of several world records, Paul Henry Nargeolet, veteran French diver, and Titanic expert who had visited the wreck over 30 times, Shahzada and Salman Dawood, a Pakistani father and son from one of the country's richest families. And, of course, Stockton Rush himself, the man who built the sub and trusted it with his life. 5 souls in a carbon tube, sealed from the world above by 17 bolts fastened from the outside. No escape hatch, no emergency backup pressure hull, no redundancy at 3,800 meters. As the Polar Prince crew prepared to release Titan into the grey morning sea, the radio crackled. Rush's voice came through, calm and confident. "Descending now," he said. "See you on the other side." They would never hear his voice again. Every great disaster begins with names that once sounded invincible. For Titan, those names carried stories of wealth, fame, and quiet obsession. Hamish Harding, 58, British aviator and billionaire adventurer, had already flown through the stratosphere on Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin rocket and circled the globe by jet in record time. The deep ocean was the one frontier he hadn't conquered. He posted on social media the night before the dive, "A mission like no other. Weather looks good. We start tomorrow." It read like an invitation to destiny. Paul Henry Nargeolet, 77, was the elder of the group. A French naval officer turned Titanic archaeologist, known as Mr. Titanic. He had spent decades mapping the wreck site, recovering artifacts, and lecturing about the ship's haunting beauty. When he agreed to join OceanGate, colleagues joked that the Titanic might finally claim him. They didn't realize how prophetic that would be. Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Salman came from one of Pakistan's wealthiest families. Shahzada loved science. Salman loved his father more. Friends later said the boy was terrified of the dive, but didn't want to disappoint him. He brought a Rubik's Cube to solve at the ocean floor, a simple, bright human gesture meant for a video to share afterward. He would never get the chance, and at the center of it all, Stockton Rush, 59, founder, pilot, evangelist of innovation. He spoke of the ocean like a frontier that owed him access. Rush was not reckless in his own mind. He was visionary. To him, doubt was cowardice, and fear was a form of laziness. Those who questioned him simply didn't get it. 5 lives, bound by a shared delusion that courage and curiosity could bend the laws of physics. They weren't villains or fools. They were dreamers, standing at the thin edge where human ambition meets natural indifference. When they boarded Titan on the morning of June 18, 2023, the sky over the North Atlantic was a dull pewter grey. Waves rolled gently around the Polar Prince. Technicians bolted the hatch shut from the outside, 17 titanium bolts sealing them in. From that moment, the 5 men were entirely dependent on a vessel the size of a minivan, with no way to open it from within. As the submersible began its descent, voices crackled over the comms. Telemetry good. Depth 1,000 meters. Systems stable. They joked about the cramped space. Nargeolet mentioned seeing this same depth on his very first dive decades ago. The pilot smiled. Everything seemed routine. But even at that moment, somewhere along the carbon fiber wall, microscopic fractures might already have been forming, imperceptible, spreading like veins through stone. The world above continued on. The passengers' families watched online updates. The clock started ticking toward a silence no one yet understood. At 8 o'clock a.m. Atlantic time, Titan slipped beneath the surface. Its carbon hull groaned faintly, a deep, throaty sound like metal sighing. Inside, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft white. 5 men sat knee to knee, backs curved, breathing recycled air. They expected a 2.5-hour descent to the Titanic's debris field. The pilot guided the sub using the Bluetooth controller, watching readouts on a small touchscreen powered by an off-the-shelf PC. Navigation was primitive. GPS signals cannot penetrate seawater, so Titan relied on textual instructions relayed by a support ship tracking its acoustic pings. At 1,000 meters, sunlight vanished. Outside, the sea turned from green to ink. Particles of marine snow drifted past the viewport like falling ash. At 2,000 meters, the temperature dropped near freezing. Condensation beaded on the hull. The only sounds were the hiss of the air scrubbers and the low rhythmic creak of the pressure shell. Rush reassured them. All normal. Carbon fiber always talks to you a bit down here. By 3,000 meters, conversation slowed. Oxygen was precious, and each breath carried a weight of expectation. Nargeolet leaned toward the porthole, hoping to glimpse the faint outline of Titanic's bow soon. Harding checked his wristwatch. Time passed differently when the world outside was absolute darkness. Then, at 3,800 meters, something shifted. The data stream to polar prints began to stutter. Acoustic pings, those coded heartbeats sent every few seconds, grew irregular. Technicians on the ship frowned, adjusted antennas, recalibrated receivers. Another ping came, distorted. Then nothing. At 9:45 a.m., contact was lost. Titan had been out of range before, briefly, during earlier dives, so the crew above waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. They assumed Rush would re-establish the link after surfacing. But the horizon remained empty. Below, whatever had happened occurred in less than 20 milliseconds. A sudden microfracture, then catastrophic collapse. The pressure at that depth is more than 5,600 psi. The hull imploded inward faster than sound could travel, releasing energy equal to several hundred kilograms of TNT. Inside Titan, the air flash heated 2,000s of degrees. The bodies of the crew vaporized before the brain could register pain. It was instantaneous, final, absolute. Above, nobody yet knew. They called repeatedly over the radio. Titan, polar prints, do you copy? Silence. They pinged the acoustic beacon again and again, hoping for the faintest echo. There was none. The ocean had reclaimed its secret. At first, no one aboard the polar prints understood what had happened. The dive had been proceeding smoothly, clear telemetry, stable depth. Then, without warning, Titan vanished from every channel at once. No radio, no sonar, not even a fading ping. Just a sudden, perfect silence. At 9:45 a.m., Stockton Rush's last transmission was logged, descending now. Approaching the bottom. After that, nothing. The crew on the support ship followed procedure. They waited the usual 15 minutes. They checked the equipment. They called over the backup comms. Then 30 minutes passed, then an hour. By 11 a.m., the faces on deck began to change. Nervous smiles stiffened. Glances grew longer toward the empty horizon. The ocean was calm that day, almost eerily so, flat as glass, grey as the sky. It was as if the sea had swallowed their echoes and closed the lid. The first step was to activate the emergency ascent beacon. A buoy Titan was designed to release if power failed, but it never appeared. That was the first sign something had gone terribly wrong. The submersible might be trapped in the wreckage, or worse, crushed. No one dared to say the word aloud yet, but everyone thought it. By noon, the Polar Prince radioed the U.S. Coast Guard. The report was brief, almost clinical. Submersible Titan, 5 persons on board. Last contact, 9:45. Depth unknown. Communication lost. Within hours, the call reached Boston Command Center, and from there, every major news outlet in the world. By evening, the words "missing Titanic sub" were everywhere, flashing across screens, headlines, and timelines. On board the Polar Prince, though, there was no media, only wind, steel, and whirring. They listened again and again for Titan's acoustic beacon, a sharp ping that should have repeated every 30 seconds, but the receivers picked up only the endless whisper of the sea. A deep-sea specialist later described that silence as the loudest sound you'll ever hear, because silence in the ocean doesn't mean stillness, it means absence. Absence of metal, of motion, of life. That night, the crew searched the black waters under floodlights. The Polar Prince circled the dive coordinates again and again, scanning for bubbles, oil, debris, nothing. The surface gave no sign that 5 people had just ceased to exist 3,800 meters below. Meanwhile, somewhere above them, commercial aircraft and satellites were already being redirected. The world was waking up to another chapter in the story of the Titanic, one written not in 1912, but in 2023. By Monday morning, the headlines had a rhythm of urgency. Titanic sub missing, 96 hours of oxygen left. It was a countdown the world could understand and cling to, but it was also an illusion. OceanGate's own specifications estimated that Titan could sustain life for 4 days, assuming the electrical systems remained functional, CO scrubbers worked, and the hull remained intact. But none of that mattered if the sub was already gone. Still, the human mind needs hope, and hope needs a number. The US and Canadian Coast Guards launched one of the most complex search operations in maritime history. Aircraft dropped sonar buoys across the search zone, an area roughly the size of Connecticut, centered near the Titanic wreck site. Ships equipped with deep-sea ROVs were diverted from commercial missions. The French research vessel Atalante was summoned from Europe, carrying the sub Victor 6000, capable of reaching the necessary depths. Even NASA and the Royal Navy joined in. Every passing hour became a race, not just against time, but against physics itself. Weather shifted, fog rolled across the Atlantic. Search planes flew in patterns, long white streaks on radar, empty circles in reality. The sea was unbroken, featureless, vast. Inside command centers, operators stared at sonar screens that pulsed with phantom echoes. At one point, hydrophones picked up rhythmic banging every 30 minutes. It sounded almost human. The media seized on it instantly. Could it be the crew? Families prayed. Commentators speculated. But experts were cautious. Sound travels strangely in the deep. The bangs could have been anything: geological activity, ships, or simply the sea talking to itself. Still, the rescue fleet expanded. Robots were dropped. Drones mapped the ocean floor. Every mechanical eye stared into the void, searching for a cylinder no larger than a delivery van. As the hours ticked away, the world watched with morbid fascination. Each news update began the same way: 80 hours left, 50 hours left, 20 hours left. Each broadcast showed the same photo: 5 smiling men, the Titan, and the haunting image of the Titanic's bow resting in eternal darkness. By Wednesday, engineers and deep-sea experts quietly began to tell reporters what they already suspected. If the Titan had suffered a catastrophic failure, rescue was impossible. At those depths, no craft could reach survivors before oxygen ran out. At those pressures, There would be no survivors at all. But the broadcasts continued, and the countdown rolled on, not because anyone believed, but because the world couldn't yet face the truth. When the truth finally came, it didn't arrive as a dramatic revelation. It came as a single, quiet statement, debris field consistent with catastrophic implosion. It was June 22, 2023, 4 days after the Titan disappeared. The words were spoken by Rear Admiral John Morga of the U.S. Coast Guard during a press briefing that lasted less than 10 minutes. The search was over. The race against time had ended before it began. A remote-operated vehicle from the ship Horizon Arctic had found the wreckage roughly 1,600 feet from the Titanic's bow. The discovery was made at dawn, on the cold seabed where both tragedies had now met. 5 separate fragments were identified: the tail cone, the front and rear end bells, and twisted panels of carbon fiber, all scattered across the silt like a shredded shell. There was no intact hull, no sign of life, no remains. The pressure had crushed Titan with a violence beyond comprehension. Experts later calculated that the implosion occurred at around 9:45 a.m., almost the exact minute when contact was lost. In less than 20 milliseconds, a fraction of the time it takes to blink, the vessel's hull collapsed inward at supersonic speed. The water around it, weighing thousands of tons per square inch, rushed in to fill the void, releasing an energy pulse equivalent to several sticks of dynamite. Inside, the temperature spiked to several thousand degrees Celsius. The human nervous system cannot process pain faster than a few milliseconds, far too slow. The 5 men never knew what happened. Their atoms were scattered in the same water they had come to admire. It was, paradoxically, the kindest possible ending for them, swift, complete, mercifully unaware. For the engineers who studied the data afterward, the disaster was inevitable. The carbon fiber hull, unlike titanium, behaves unpredictably under repeated stress. It does not deform, it shatters. Each previous dive had weakened it, producing microscopic delaminations invisible to cameras or sensors. Rush had trusted his instincts instead of the math. And the ocean does not negotiate with instincts. Later, one investigator compared it to squeezing a soda can under a hydraulic press, except that the can was the size of a car, and the press was the entire Atlantic Ocean. By the time search teams arrived at the coordinates, Titan had been gone for 4 days. All that remained were fragments, drifting in the same currents that once carried lifeboats from the Titanic. The debris field was eerily similar in shape and scale to that of the 1912 wreck, as though history had folded back upon itself. On the seabed, a new monument had been created, the grave of those who tried to touch the past and became part of it instead. When the first photographs of Titan's wreckage appeared, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. To disasters, 111 years apart, both born of human pride, both ending in the same stretch of Atlantic darkness. In 1912, the Titanic was the pinnacle of technology, a triumph of iron and ambition. Its builders boasted that God himself could not sink this ship. In 2023, Titan was the embodiment of innovation, a triumph of carbon fiber and Silicon Valley philosophy. Its creator said, "Safety just slows innovation, different centuries, same illusion." Even the names seemed destined to echo: Titanic, Titan, one a ship of dreams, the other a sub that wanted to dream again. When the Coast Guard announced the implosion, the internet erupted in irony, disbelief, and fascination. Some mocked the absurdity of billionaires dying to see a shipwreck. Others mourned the loss of explorers who dared to go where few had gone before. But beneath the noise, one truth resonated. The ocean had not changed, only human arrogance had. At the wreck site, Victor 6000, the French RAV, captured haunting images, carbon fragments scattered among the rusting steel of Titanic's hull. The sea had merged two stories into one, erasing a century of distance. There, on the floor of the Atlantic, history was perfectly symmetrical. The grand ship of 1912, destroyed by an iceberg, the tiny sub of 2023, destroyed by its own design. Both had been hailed as indestructible. Both had vanished in silence. In museums and documentaries, Titanic had long been framed as a cautionary tale about man's faith in machines. Titan's implosion renewed that warning for the 21st century, proof that technology may change, but human nature does not. The same voices that once spoke of unsinkable ships now spoke of revolutionary materials and game-changing innovation. The words had changed, the arrogance had not. OceanGate ceased operations within days. Investigations followed, lawsuits loomed, and experts dissected every decision that led to the disaster. But beneath all the technical analysis, the failed fiber composites, the uncertified viewports, the ignored warnings, was something simpler, a refusal to respect the deep. Even now, the Titanic lies intact, her ghostly bow staring through the eternal gloom, while Titan is gone without a trace, pulverized by the same forces that preserved her predecessor. It's as if the ocean itself had chosen which story deserved to be remembered. On the sonar maps, the two debris fields from a chilling pattern, one massive, one minuscule, both symbols of mankind's endless dialogue with the abyss. Every age builds its own Titanic, wrote one historian after the implosion. And the sea, patient as always, waits to collect the pieces. Long before Titan vanished, the warnings had already been written, ignored, archived, or dismissed as negativity. The implosion was not a surprise to those who had once worked inside OceanGate. As early as 2018, the Marine Technology Society, a respected group of deep submergence professionals, sent Stockton Rush a formal letter. They urged him to submit Titan for independent certification, warning that experimental materials, like carbon fiber, could fail under cyclic pressure. The letter was polite, but firm. Your current approach could have catastrophic consequences. Rush never responded. When asked about it later, he smiled. Certification, he said, doesn't ensure safety. Innovation does. Inside OceanGate, dissent didn't last long. David Lockridge, the company's director of marine operations, raised concerns after inspecting the sub's viewport and hull bonding. He discovered that the forward acrylic window was only certified for depths up to 1,300 meters, far shallower than the 3,800 meters of the Titanic site. He wrote a report demanding ultrasonic scans of the hull before further dives. Instead of being heard, he was fired. OceanGate sued him for revealing trade secrets. In the small world of submersible engineers, that lawsuit was an alarm bell. To many, it confirmed what they feared. OceanGate's obsession with speed and spectacle had replaced the culture of caution that deep-sea exploration depends on. Rush dismissed his critics as old white men clinging to outdated rules. He believed the new world belonged to visionaries, not bureaucrats. Yet those bureaucrats had buried colleagues before. They knew what the deep could do. Even OceanGate's own passengers had their doubts. Some reported makeshift repairs, condensation leaks, and unexplained noises during earlier dives. A CBS reporter who joined a 2022 expedition recalled that the controller lost connection mid-descent. Rush laughed and reset it. That's why we bring spares, he said. But physics doesn't care about spares. Each dive weakened the hull by microscopic degrees, and with every successful mission, confidence grew while safety eroded. It was the same paradox that doomed the Challenger shuttle 1986. The longer a risky system operates without failure, the safer it feels, until it doesn't. Titan's tragedy was not a single moment of failure. It was a chain of ignored evidence, a slow, quiet accumulation of arrogance. From the start, the mission had been sold as an adventure for the elite, $250,000 tickets, billionaire explorers, glossy documentaries. Behind that curtain, the engineering culture had become theater, safety reduced to a story, risk to a brand. When investigators later reconstructed the events, they found no villains in the legal sense, only people who believed as strongly in their own genius. That belief, untested by humility, is the most dangerous pressure of all. The wreck of the Titan just meters from the Titanic's bow to generations of ambition frozen side by side in the same black water. One built to conquer the sea, the other built to visit its ghost. Both destroyed by the same idea, that the ocean is a stage for human glory. In the months after the implosion, debates filled the headlines. Some called it a failure of regulation, others a failure of imagination. But beneath the technical postmortems, something deeper lingered, a reminder that progress without humility is just another form of recklessness. We live in an age that celebrates disruption. Engineers talk of moving fast, breaking limits, rewriting rules. The Titan was built in that spirit, a startup-esque dream lowered into a realm that allows no experiments. The ocean is not a sandbox for entrepreneurs. It is a cathedral built by pressure and silence, and every visitor must kneel. When rescuers mapped the debris, they noted how small it seemed against the expanse of the Titanic's shadow. To tragedies, one lesson: technology cannot make us gods. It can only make our mistakes faster, cleaner, and more expensive. Families of the lost spoke of forgiveness. Scientists spoke of reform. But the ocean, as always, spoke through silence. It offers no anger, no vengeance, no comfort, only truth. A century ago, Titanic taught the world that metal and pride sink the same way. In 2023, Titan repeated the message. Even at the edge of the modern age, arrogance is still heavier than steel. The story ends where it began, in darkness, under 4 kilometers of crushing water. Down there, light bends and sound dies. Time slows until it feels like forever. And in that stillness, side by side, two machines rest, one born of steam, one of carbon, both monuments to the oldest human illusion, that we can master the sea. Every age builds its own Titanic, a diver once said, and the abyss waits patiently, knowing we'll send it another.